Good morning, everyone, and welcome again to the Summit Series. It has been a while. My name is Robyn King. I am Director of Industry Relations at Payments Canada. And happy Halloween to everyone. So in keeping with that theme, we thought we'd scare you today and talk about cybersecurity. But as usual, we will have a panel of experts and we will do a roundtable discussion with them first off. And we will leave time at the end for audience questions. So please do use your Q&A box, the Ask the Speaker box that is on the right-hand side of your screen. And we will try to get to as many questions as we can at the end. Now, as we know, the digital payments landscape continues to evolve at an accelerated pace, and this benefits both consumers and businesses alike. But it also creates new possibilities for cyber threats. So with today being the last day of Cybersecurity Awareness Month, we thought it would be a good opportunity for us to come together and just talk a little bit about this dark side of payments. Joining me today is Nick Aleks, who is the Senior Director of Security at Wealthsimple, and he's also the author of Black Hat GraphQL. Aviva Klein, who is the Vice President of Digital Payments and Cybersecurity Solutions at Mastercard Canada, and our own Martin Kyle, who is our Chief Information Security Officer here at Payments Canada. So welcome, everyone. I think we'll start off with intros, and then we will dive into the questions. So Aviva, I will start with you.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you very much to Payments Canada and Robyn for this opportunity this morning. At Robyn, as you mentioned, my name is Aviva Klein. I am the Vice President of Digital Payments and Cyber and Intelligence Solutions at Mastercard. Been in the payments business for longer than I care to admit, and closing in on 12 years at Mastercard. So thank you for having me here today.
Thanks, Aviva. Nick?
Hello, thanks for having me. I'm Nick, the Senior Director of Security at Wealthsimple. I am the author of Black Hat GraphQL, as well as the founder of DEF CON Toronto. So in short, I am a cyber defender as well as a hacker. Thank you for having me.
Sounds interesting and ominous. Thanks, Nick. And then last but not least, Martin.
Hi there. Thanks for having me, Robyn. My name is Martin Kyle, and I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at Payments Canada. I've been a CISO for about 10 years, and before that, a security architect. And my background is software development, risk management, and my mantra right now is let's shift left with our security and build it in at the beginning.
Thanks, Martin. I'm sure we'll get into that today a little bit. So let's start off with our roundtable questions. And I want to start off with talking about today's cyber threat landscape. So what are each of you observing today? And then what are you anticipating for the future? And Aviva, I'll start with you. You're on mute. There we go.
So I'm going to answer that question by actually taking a quick step back and starting by sort of looking at the early payments ecosystem. And, prior to 2012, the payments ecosystem was largely comprised of issuers, acquirers, merchants, and consumers, making up the four-party model. And these network connections between these stakeholders were clearly defined and protected according to our industry standards and protocols. And during that time, physical acceptance and face-to-face transactions really sort of dominated. And therefore, the risk of widespread, large-scale fraud and cyber attacks was really limited. Fraudsters couldn't really easily access well-protected connections and predominantly physical acceptance environments. And the individual fraud protections in place for each stakeholder really helped to detect the various types of fraud that occurred within the scope of their defined network connections. If we then sort of entered into the period of sort of the early 2010s, about 10 years ago, where digital payments really started to take off, and there was a significant amount of growth, both in terms of the number of digital payments, but also the number of digital merchants and third-party providers entering the ecosystem and increasing the number of undefined technologies, or undefined connections, I should say, between these stakeholders. And these unprotected emerging technologies really became fertile breeding ground for criminals. And these fraudsters capitalized on digital growth, exploiting the increasing points of vulnerability in the ecosystem to perpetuate these types of attacks, and these attacks really on a large scale basis. So during this time, we saw criminals infiltrate weakest points within the systems. We saw fraudsters and criminals creating duplicate fraudulent accounts using the point of sale system and the ATM system to perpetuate cash out attacks. And this was sort of in this time, of course, lots of companies came together to create monitoring solutions to help provide more protection across this growing ecosystem. And as the ecosystem continues to evolve, and customers, have this unrelenting push for being served in a digital environment, for personalization, for increased consumer convenience, we're going to see increasing greater complexity in our payments landscape and our payments acceptance and processing environments. And so, I believe, to make a long story short, that in the future, as we continue to see an explosion of digital players and applications and currencies and payment types and devices that are being infused into this payments ecosystem, we're going to have infinitely more and often unprotected connections. And so I think that, there's going to be a significant amount of threat for these unprotected vectors. So things like IoT are going to continue to provide fertile breeding ground for fraudsters who are going to continue to exploit the weakest link in these IoT devices. And I think also from a future perspective, we're going to see a lot more account takeover and synthetic IDs that are going to continue to rise as we push for more convenience in our day-to-day digital lives. And I think that a lot of this is going to be perpetuated by both phishing and social engineering. I don't know about others on the panel, but I'm getting phishing attempts at least daily, if not multiple times a day. So yeah, that's sort of my answer on sort of what I see coming in the future and where we are right now.
Thanks, Aviva. That was a great start to the discussion. Nick, I'll go to you next and just get some of your perspectives on what you're seeing today.
Yeah, for sure. So we're seeing a number of threats in our industry right now. The first being social engineering, as Aviva mentioned. Threat actors are continuing to find ways to steal the credentials of our employees and our staff. Once they steal these credentials, they then use them to access our systems directly and also to pivot onto different networks and subsystems, mainly to exfiltrate data. But as we are increasingly moving money more to the digital side, they will also try to exfiltrate funds internally within our systems. The second big vector that we are seeing a huge rise in is third-party compromises. Partners, suppliers, and trusted organizations have privileged access into some of our systems, and they aren't immune to cyber attacks. When these organizations and partners get compromised, the threat actors will use these trusted channels to pivot into our organizational environments and exfiltrate data and also attack us within. In the future, I agree with Aviva. I think cyber fraud is definitely going to be on the rise, especially as we continue to modernize our payments and the rise of cryptocurrency usage as well. Money is moving more and more digital, and it's going to come with it additional threat vectors and attack vectors. As mentioned, ATOs, fake accounts. Threat actors are going to seamlessly start to blend some of their fraud techniques with some of their cybersecurity exploits and look to steal funds and money from our customers. But that's what I have to share.
Thanks, Nick. And Martin, maybe from a central point of view, anything to add there?
Sorry about that. Thank you. I'm going to just mention a recent release from our National Cyber Center, which is the National Cyber Threat Assessment. And that looks forward to what's, taking information from about what's happening today and looking forward for the next couple of years. And there are kind of 5 key things that they mention. Ransomware is persistent in Canada. It's a persistent threat to Canadian organizations. Critical infrastructure is increasingly at risk from cyber threat activity, and I'll touch on that in just a second, since Payments Canada is part of the critical infrastructure in Canada as the owner and operator of national clearing and settlement systems. The third item that the National Threat Assessment identifies is state-sponsored cyber threat activity is impacting Canadians. The fourth of the 5 items is that cyber threat actors are attempting to influence Canadians, degrading trust in online spaces. And the 5th one is that disruptive technologies bring new opportunities and new threats. So disruptive technologies are an opportunity and a threat. So understanding that kind of dual-edged nature of disruptive technologies is important. So I wanted to mention just a moment what we're seeing at Payments Canada on our perimeter, and I'll just touch on the email attack vector, or the email mechanism. And if we discount spam, we're seeing about 30 in the last quarter. We've seen about 30% of attacks are malware related, and 70% of attacks are phishing related. Now, these attacks happen to all organizations all the time, and your ability as a security organization to detect and respond these attacks is crucial in maintaining your defensive posture and protecting your organization and your remit from these particular issues. We have seen some interesting changes recently with respect to banking Trojans. Emotet was a banking Trojan that was very popular, and it's still popular, but it has been overtaken by a new banking Trojan, Iced ID. We have some funny names for things in the security space, but we try to identify the names of particular threats, as well as crews that are using these exploits to attack their targets. What we've noticed is that these crews also like supply chains. As Nick had mentioned, the third party set of providers often have privileged access to your systems. And so it's not enough to just look at your own organization. You have to extend your risk management capabilities to those of your third parties. And one of the areas of third-party risk management that is often neglected, but is gaining a lot more visibility recently, is what's included in your software. A lot of software is built on a foundation of open source libraries, and some of those libraries themselves can be compromised and introduce risk into your environment. So we're seeing all of these things in the current threat landscape. And what about the future? I'll just give you one thing that's kind of worrying me about the future, and that is Y2Q, or the year 2 quantum. So for those who are not aware, quantum computers, which represent a great opportunity, also represent a threat to modern day cryptography. And that sometimes takes many years to change out. And while the quantum horizon, or the event, or the time frame at which quantum computers are sufficiently powerful to break current cryptography, while that time is many years out, some say 8 to 15 years out, it takes time to change out existing cryptography. And so that's something that I'm anticipating for the future and working on to resolve for the critical infrastructure within Canada for payments, clearing, and settlement.
Thanks, Martin. So kind of along that line is, we know that at the same time that we're evolving in the payment space and in our own businesses, like those cyber threat actors are evolving as well and getting smarter, and the technology is getting faster, to your point, Martin. So how can organizations keep up, or actually better yet, keep a more proactive stance against this? Do you see like data or AI or any other advancements in areas such as policy that can help organizations actually keep pace with these threat actors? And perhaps next, Nick, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, for sure. At Wealthsimple, we take a really proactive approach to security. And this is not done through some special security product or tool. What we've done is we've embedded a core set of principles within our organization that really level up our security culture. At its core is a mindset, which is to stop a hacker, you need to think like a hacker. And the ways that we've done this, the ways that we've implemented this hacker mindset is through partnerships. So investing in local Toronto hacker meetups and communities, working with folks in the community to bring in cybersecurity knowledge about some of the latest exploits and risks, and embedding that into our teams, allowing our engineers to incorporate it while they do their threat modeling before they build a new feature or product, or playing CTFs, capture the flag hacker games that allow employees to learn about the different hacker techniques that are there that they can then use against the products that we are building to find vulnerabilities before bad actors do. We also use the exact same tools and techniques that bad actors use in order to continuously test our own defenses. It's not enough to just blindly try to build and deploy defenses at an organization. You need to continuously validate that they're working, and also ensure that they are patched and stay patched. And the only way you can verify that is by continuously testing yourself. And then finally, we publicly incentivize hackers and researchers to attack us through our bug bounty program. We want folks to come to us when they find a vulnerability. We want researchers to spend their time researching the Wealthsimple platform and our products. It's only then that we're able to then continuously not just test ourselves, but open ourselves up to the wider public to test us as well. Now, keeping on that theme of keeping at the same pace as the threat actors, doing this alone is not good enough. Security is not a competitive advantage, and we need to keep pace together because, as we mentioned, third-party compromises happen, and they happen with some of our most trusted partners. So sharing intelligence, sharing knowledge is absolutely key, because whether it's a fintech or a big bank, if there's a cyber breach that impacts either of these organizations, it's going to be a bad day for Canadians. So coming together as an industry to share tools, knowledge, and insights are some of the best ways for all of us to keep pace with threat actors.
That's great. That's very interesting. Thanks, Nick. Martin, how about you? Any thoughts on this?
Certainly. How can we be more proactive in our posture? I think one of the things that Nick mentioned is, or inferred, and was the speed at which attackers are able to not only perform reconnaissance on their target, but get inside of their target and then do some what we call in the trade actions on objectives. And one of those actions on an objective is fraud, right? So we have all these things that happen before the fraud event. The attacker will do reconnaissance, and then they'll get a foothold into the environment, and then they'll start pivoting and looking around in the environment. They'll maybe put in a back door, and then once they understand it, then they'll perform their action on the objective, which in the financial services is often fraud. And so there's a lot of things we can do before fraud happens. We can detect and identify these attackers right at the beginning when they start doing reconnaissance. We can try to lock them out on the perimeter. We can detect them if they land in our environments, whether that environment is corporate environment or the environment on your grandmother's endpoint who's doing online banking. There's all these actions that happen before that fraud event occurs, and that's where the kind of cybersecurity work becomes very effective in reducing losses. So the speed at which an attacker will go through that attack life cycle, or that kill chain, as we sometimes call it, is increasing. And that means our speed as defenders also needs to increase. We need to be faster at defending than the attacker is at achieving their action on objective. And as we speed up through refined processes, detection of anomalies at these earlier stages in the kill chain, as we speed up, we have a better chance of mitigating any potential losses that could occur from an action on the objective, where a hacker either exfiltrates data or tries to manipulate the integrity of a payment or any other number of particular outcomes that they're seeking. So speeding up ourselves, being lean, reducing waste in those processes, being efficient, looking for anomalies against a standard baseline, what is bad versus good, reducing the number of what we call false positives, that reduces friction in being able to defend. And that's important to mitigate potential losses as well. One of the things that AI and machine learning, artificial intelligence and machine learning offers us is the ability to detect anomalies against these known good baselines. So we can actually leverage and harness these advances in this defense capability. However, we also use artificial intelligence and machine learning in other aspects of our business. And we must be careful with those models that they do not get manipulated by adversaries in a way that goes against our business objectives. And so having some mechanism or policy for model risk management is important, so that we can see if these models begin drifting too far away from their training data. Because attacks from adversaries and hackers can also manipulate our AI and machine learning models, and thus take those to a place where they're producing output that was never intended. That's another area that I think we should be looking at in the future to have a proactive posture.
Thanks, Martin. Yeah, that last point is actually something I never thought of, is that some of the solutions could become some of the future problems. Aviva, I'm keen to hear about Mastercard in terms of how you keep up with threat actors, or at least even be proactive against them.
I mean, I'll just reiterate a lot of the things that Nick mentioned before in terms of security by design, a layered approach to security. We've been in the security business for as long as the network has been around. We get targeted actively many hundreds of times a day. And our fusion center is up and running and prepared to handle with ease, or sorry, not with ease, but with pace, hopefully with ease too. Any incidents that do come our way, we do a ton of exercises where we are, defending ourselves actively against sort of staged attacks. And I think we also, in a lot of the solutions that we offer to our customers that use our network, we use a lot of AI and machine learning to help our customers, pinpoint fraudulent transactions. And, as you said before, payments, are smarter and faster than they ever have been. And, unfortunately, so are criminals and money launderers. And they are taking advantage of the speed and ease at which money can be moved between accounts today. So, when we think about how we work with our customers to protect them and protect our ecosystem, definitely we see a significant amount of AI and machine learning, helping financial institutions identify criminal activity, whether that's, money laundering or any other type of, specific fraud that, the banks can implement to protect their customer from any further losses, as well as themselves from, reputational damage or any fines that may be levied by the regulator. And we're I think in a good place. I mean, we have the ability to leverage, a high volume and high quality data. And we can take all of that data, both from, the Mastercard network itself, any third-party data that we use that we can take in. And, we're building aggregated and anonymized data sets to help the ecosystem fight against specific types of fraud. So we're, obviously we're very focused on making sure that nobody enters our network and we're protecting our network, but we also have a number of solutions out in the marketplace to help customers fight fraud if, and when, God forbid, threat actors do take hold, or gain access to environments. And we've seen some pretty incredible success. When we look at our data and some of the, models that we've deployed, we see that we've increased fraud detection by 3 times while reducing false declines 20 times. We, can see and predict outcomes to and help, acquirers avoid putting transactions on a network to even begin with. And so by working with customers to get, better predictions on the outcomes of events, we think that we can better protect the ecosystem. And I think the other big thing that, is important to understand is, this idea of being able to compute massive amounts of data in a very relative, in most cases, real time. And so we are also working in various parts around the world with our customers to provide a broader view of the ecosystem that really goes beyond their 4 walls. So typically, financial institutions really can only see what's happening within their own ecosystem. And increasingly, we're working beyond those 4 walls to give our customers better sense of the inbound and the outbound flows and what's sort of being infiltrated and exfiltrated and how is money moving in a fraudulent way across different organizations. So, we really want to work with partners to help protect their business and their customers. And as I said before, it's really about predicting and protecting for us.
Thanks, Aviva. Yeah, and I was going to say, it seems to be the common thread through all of what all 3 of you were saying was this is an ecosystem effort. It's not just, you can't just tackle this on your own. I think using as many different parties and different players in the ecosystem, the better the protection.
It is a team sport, isn't it?
Exactly. Okay, so thinking specifically about payments, and that's why we're here today. And we all know that modern payments will create and already has created incredible opportunities and efficiencies. But how do we strike that balance between making sure we still deliver on innovative payment methods and new payments method, but still keeping it safe? And I know, Martin, this is something at Payments Canada that is a very fine balance for us because we do want those new payments methods. We do want those efficiencies and that broader access, but we still have a mandate to keep it safe. So, Martin, I'll go to you first. And what are your thoughts on this?
Well, thank you, Robyn. Certainly, Payments Canada is in the payments business. In the last few years, we have brought innovation and modernization to the ACSS and to the high value system transitioning that from our legacy large value transfer system to the new Links real-time gross settlement system. And we currently work on the real-time rail, which will offer new and additional innovation to Canadians. And for each of these systems, building security in has been a top priority. And the way that we've been doing this is ensuring ahead of time, proactively, that we have clear measures that we're trying to achieve before any of these systems even go to test and certainly go to release. So we look at all what we call all layers of the stack, from the infrastructure and the bare metal, or even the physical layer, right up through to the application. And then when you build a piece of software, you can kind of break it down into, certainly there's planning and marketing, understanding market requirements and then planning and program planning, et cetera. But kind of the core from a software development perspective is, how are you going to design this thing? How are you going to build it? How are you going to test it? And is all of that going to be done in time for the release? And so what we do at Payments Canada is we instrument each of those phases of the system development lifecycle to ensure that we're hitting predefined thresholds for security. And we enumerate the security requirements, both functional and non-functional, that we want to achieve in a system. We ensure that as we build the system, we're looking at the security risks in the application, but also within the digital supply chain, as I spoke previously. We want to make sure that our coverage is complete, that we're looking at all the things that we know go into a new system and service. We want to ensure that by inventorying all of the components, we also evaluate the security of those components. And then as we get into our testing phases, we want to make sure we're testing things with the hacker mindset, like Nick talked about. And we also want to make sure that we're testing our security capabilities, those things that will allow us to detect and respond to adversaries earlier in the attack lifecycle, once that product or that service goes into production. So there's a lot of things that we can do during the build phases of delivering innovative payment systems. And if we ensure that we have a clear and methodical and predefined set of release criteria around security, we can then move a system from the build to the operation parts of its life cycle in a secure, reliable, and resilient way.
Thanks, Martin. And Aviva, I'm sure from a Mastercard perspective, a similar perspective, you're at the center, your infrastructure, and you have new products and services that you release. So probably some similar thoughts, but I'd be keen to hear what they are in terms of this.
Yeah, I mean, again, sort of echoing what Martin has said, security by design and a layered approach is definitely top of mind for us. It has always been like that, even, from going back even, to the signature panel and then the mag stripe and chip. And, from day one, we've really been a security by design shop. I think also, this idea of, frameworks, security frameworks, publishing those frameworks, having a common, operating standard across all ecosystem participants is key. Fraud definitely travels to the weakest link. So we want to make sure that all participants on the network, regardless of what network that may be, are, operating at a sufficiently secure level. I think even more sort of tactically, when I think about real-time payments and sort of transaction processing and money movement in general, this answer is a little bit more tactical than I think where Martin took us. But even, we need to find ways to get some basic stuff done, right? Validating the sender and the receiver of funds, whether that's a push payment, a pull payment, a request to pay, a credit card transaction, a debit card transaction. We spent a lot of time in the ecosystem, validating the cardholder, the buyer, the sender through various authentication methods. I think, one of the things that we're going to have to really think about as we balance, our craving for more innovation as just right individuals in this very exciting time is those additional checks and balances, so that we don't inadvertently create fertile breeding ground for new forms of fraud, which we saw 10, 15 years ago when the rise of digital payments really took hold. So I think again, sort of looking at validating both ends of transactions is going to be something that we're going to have to really think through, whether that's using existing forms of security like biometrics or even OTP, maybe including other emerging forms of security technology like digital identification and reusable credentials and tokenization. Those are sort of things that we are thinking about at Mastercard as payments start to take different shapes and form. We really need to find a way to have the industry better protect ourselves. And then, of course, once we do identify, this is a problematic recipient or a problematic sender or an account or whatnot, how do we respond to those events in a faster way? But also, how do we communicate with our customers that are affected by these types of frauds in a more secure, real-time, authentic, personalized way? So those are some of the things that we think about at Mastercard as we see the future of payments really continue to evolve at a very rapid pace.
Thanks, Aviva. I think we're going into the future of payments a little bit more eyes wide open than maybe we would have 10, 15 years ago. So I think we've got that advantage. But like you say, there's a lot of things to think about when we put in these measures. There's a whole lot of other customer relationship impacts, inclusion and accessibility impacts. So it's not just about the tool, it becomes broader than that. Nick, I'd just like to go to you from an organizational standpoint. What could security leaders listening today do to build a culture of that cyber awareness in their organization?
Yeah, for sure. A strong cybersecurity culture, I'd say, is the closest thing we have to a silver bullet against threat actors. Leaders that are able to effectively build and promote a strong security culture have effectively taken traditionally what is seen as a weakness and harnessed it into a strength, which is their people, the employees. So imagine being a hacker who has just gained initial access into an organization. A poor security culture would mean that everything and everyone you see is a target. A strong security culture translates that into everything and everyone becomes a security guard. Now, some of the ways that you can promote this and ways that we've done that at Wealthsimple is obviously thinking like a hacker and embedding that hacker mindset in every department that we can, but to also first move away from the traditional way that security is seen at an organization, which is seen as the department of no, access denied, you're not allowed to do this. Working closely with every single line of business and holding another level of quality to the security controls that we promote is important. When you make the fast and simple way also the most secure way to work, you prevent the needs for employees to cut corners or bypass security controls, and you incentivize folks to use the rails and the guardrails that you've put in place to truly protect customers' information and their money. Now, at Wealthsimple, what we've done is that we've implemented a year-round security champions program. And for those who don't know what a security champions program is, effectively, we've gone to every single team and we've allowed them to spend 10% of their time with one particular resource and delegate to work with security, to build tools, learn, and even jump into incidents and help us fight fires. By sharing this knowledge and building these tools, you take these resources that belong to other departments and teams, and you turn them into de facto security leaders when they go back into their organizations and their teams, thus allowing them to spread and promote the knowledge that they gained within the security team. Second, what security leaders should try to do is to look at building trust internally, rather than trying to sell fear or only talking about ways that they're mitigating risk or those negative metrics. Start thinking about how security ties to the company's overall mission. How does it promote trust with employees as well as its customers? How many security conscious and privacy conscious users have actually onboarded onto your platform because you have a strong security program in place? The next thing I'd say is to start being more transparent as well with your customers as well as with your employees. Letting employees know when security incidents arise or when there's a near miss, and using that as a way to train and build awareness around risks that the organization faces without scaring them is extremely important. Folks will then understand why certain controls are required and why they need to be embedded, as well as sharing security wins with the entire organization. We recently achieved our SOC 2 Type 1, and it was truly an organizational effort, and the entire company came together to celebrate that huge win. So these are some of the ways that you can really promote a strong security culture within your organization and use it to tie back into your company's overall mission to promote success.
Thanks, Nick. I like that. Practical suggestions. So we have one more question that we've got ahead of going to audience questions. So just a reminder to the audience, if you do want to ask the speakers a question, you can use the Ask a Speaker box that you'll see on your screen. So as we close off on the formal questions, I'd just like to probably go to each of you and ask you for a quick practical tip. What is one thing everyone can do today to make their organizations more secure? Martin, I'll go to you first.
Well, thank you. I'd like to emphasize that fraud losses are the end of the cycle. That's the last thing the adversary does on your computer. And so there are many things that you can do ahead of that. And if you are an individual and you're trying to protect yourself from fraud, be very conscious of what you have installed in your system. If you didn't ask for it, don't install it. If you installed it, keep it up to date. And if you no longer need it, get rid of it. Many of us represent financial institutions who deal with fraud problems. And we need to raise the tide of the security hygiene of our customer base. And so we not only need to secure our own systems, but we need to educate and help our customers so that all together we reduce those fraud losses and can reduce costs and friction within the system as a whole.
Thanks, Martin. Aviva?
I'm going to focus on the everyone and pragmatic part of your question there, and sort of build, I guess, on Martin. I think, and as I said before, I think, fighting fraud is a team sport, and you're only as good as your weakest link. So, these are simple, low cost, low effort things, but even things like, don't use the same password. Keep your passwords up to date. Attend training that your organization provides and encourage others to do so. Obviously, don't click phishing. Be aware, those types of things, and really just sort of do your part in defending against the daily onslaught of attempts. That would be my advice for everyone on this call.
Thanks, Aviva. And then Nick, I'll go to you last.
Yeah, for sure. I know I spoke a lot about, embedding that hacker mindset and really testing your own controls with it. But first, investing in those security fundamentals is extremely important. Having a really well thought out vulnerability management program is key. Password management as well, embedding multi-factor authentication, using WebAuth or hardware tokens. This makes it so that it's, extremely hard for an attacker to phish or take over the accounts of our employees. And then also, a piece of advice on ensuring that third-party compromises are held at bay is to move away from these point-in-time assessments with third parties and continuously evaluate those trusted channels that you have coming into your ecosystem. That's extremely important. Once you've got some of those security fundamentals in place, transitioning over into building out a bug bounty program, testing your controls, investing in a red team to hack and test those controls, and teaching your staff how to hack, that then allows you to be extremely proactive.
Okay, so we do have a few audience questions that have come through, quite a few. So and we do have some time, so we will get to as many as we can. This is quite an interesting one and quite timely. What are the benefits of more data traveling with payments from a cybersecurity perspective? Martin, obviously we're looking at implementation of ISO on our links or our high-value system, and then RTR will have ISO messages as well. So a lot more data going with payments. So how are the cyber risks going to be mitigated, maybe even supported by this more data, or maybe there's more risk? So Martin, I'll start with you.
Yes, thank you, Robyn. So it's like many new technologies and capabilities, there are opportunities and risks. And so there are huge opportunities with the new payment messaging standard. The opportunity for enriched data may lead, and is intended to lead, to eventually to straight-through processing. So we can actually increase the efficiency of payments from originator to recipient. And we spoke at the summit earlier this year. I was part of a panel that spoke about potential harmful content in payment messages. And there are two types of harmful content. One, socially harmful, so payment messages that might have in the future abusive text associated with that content, or payment messages that have that contain technical attacks, if you will, on intervening payment nodes. Both of those types of harmful content are things that we are aware of, and we are building mitigants for within the ecosystem. As we've heard in this call, it's a team sport. And so some of those obligations lie with the endpoints who are sending and receiving payments. So while there are opportunities with new payment methods, there are some new risks going into this new world. With our eyes open, allows us to plan for and mitigate these risks. And we are also learning lessons from other jurisdictions around the world that have introduced such capabilities. And so I would say those are some of the opportunities, and those are some of the risks. Another opportunity is, I'm going to build on what we've talked about with the other panelists, is that this is a team sport, that information sharing is important, and that cybersecurity is not a competitive advantage. And so we have the opportunity to look at trends across institutions that maybe one institution cannot see alone. And that's an opportunity that we need to further explore and analyze and build rules around.
Thanks, Martin. And Aviva, as a payments person at heart, what do you think in terms of the increased remittance data?
I mean, to me, like more data, better decisions. Just as simple as that. I mean, a lot of people don't realize how much data is actually being transferred when you buy that ticket or you buy that good or service on your mobile phone or your or your web browser. There's just a ton of data that gets collected by the card network, by the merchant. Is your phone in your left hand? Is it in your right hand? Is it this way or is it that way? And so all of those pieces of information help make better decisions and help provide input into the probability of that event happening again. So we love data. And we build a lot of our decisioning models and a lot of our propensity models on the masses of data that we collect, of course, all anonymized.
Thanks. Nick, maybe one for you, and this is probably something I'm guilty of, is I always think it's never going to happen to me. So how important is it that organizations adopt a mentality of treating the risk of cybersecurity as more of a win, not an if?
Yeah, this is a huge mindset shift with a lot of organizations. Every single organization should take an assumed breach mentality. Assume an attack is going to come, and it's going to come either tomorrow or next week. And when you have that mentality, you start to really think about, okay, how can we get good at fighting fires rather than trying to prevent them from starting in the first place? Because when you get really good at fighting off incidents, containing risks, you reduce the impact that those risks and those incidents have on the organization. The ways that organizations can do this is by really turning their post-mortem process when an incident is done and complete, and evaluating how well the incident was triaged and handled. So really looking at not just closing off the RCA, the root cause analysis of the incident, but taking a step back and asking, how well did we fight that fire? How well did we inform our stakeholders? How quickly did we contain it? So asking more of those how questions rather than, what is it that we have to patch? Because when you start thinking about, okay, what's that thing I need to patch? You're going to keep just filling these little holes and not really thinking and introspecting on how we as an organization can get really good at fighting these fires. So the next time an incident happens, definitely take a note down and say we have to do a really good deep dive postmortem on it, and get better at fighting these fires, because it isn't a question of if an incident is going to happen. They are going to happen, and it's getting good at fighting them that allows us as an organization to thrive and share our insights with our partners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's right, Nick. I think just being aware that these things do happen. I think sometimes some of us are insulated from it, so we don't actually realize how much of it is really happening. I'm just going to skip ahead here, and in the interest of time, Martin, maybe one for you. What are your thoughts on security risks such as fraud and the risks to consumers with regards to real-time payments, as we've seen real-time payments being more prevalent across the world, and the irrevocability of those payments? So I think that's the key to this: is how do you respond to those cyber threats?
Oh, that's a good question. It's a good question because it's relevant, and it's something that we think about a lot. So, as I mentioned previously in my comments, when fraud happens, it's the last thing an adversary does on your computer before getting out, and so there are a lot of things that we can do as cybersecurity professionals before the fraud happens. The fraudster or the attacker will start by doing some reconnaissance, and they'll send a phishing link or try to steal your credentials. They'll try to gain a foothold into the computer. They'll drop some malware. They'll get a backdoor. They'll pivot to other computers on your network to get more privilege. Once they've understand and got all the footholds they need, they will perform their action on the objective. which, if it's an individual, is often fraud. If it's an organization, could be exfiltration of data, it could be ransomware, it could be extortion, it could be a number of things, or it could be a significant heist, if you will, a fraud. So in either case, those actions on objectives are at the end of the kill chain. Now, with real-time payments, the question that is often asked, is there real-time fraud, right? With real-time payments, is there real-time fraud? There is the potential for real-time fraud. So we have to put in real-time systems for detection and response. So we can't have real-time payments with the threat of real-time fraud without having real-time mitigants, right? If our mitigants are manual and slow, they're not going to catch the real-time fraud that comes with real-time payments. So we have to modernize, we have to uplift our security capabilities. We have to leverage the tools like artificial intelligence, machine learning for anomaly detection to help us with real-time mitigation of real-time fraud. And so it's not just our payment systems that have to innovate and move ahead, but it's also our security capabilities.
Thanks, Martin. Okay, I think maybe time for one more. So let's do a question for all of you. If you could just give some quick thoughts on this question was about what do you view as the biggest actual cyber risks to each of your organizations? So is it data exposure and exfiltration, network compromises, consumer payment fraud, etc.? What are you seeing as the biggest one? And then how do you measure all those risks? So I will start with you, Aviva.
I would say our largest risk is having a bad actor, get access to the Mastercard network and start taking control of our authorizations and declines, and authorizing a whole bunch of transactions that are either fictitious or shouldn't be authorized. So I would say that's, from Mastercard perspective, that's a big one.
Thanks, Aviva. Nick?
Yeah, definitely resonates with me. And, on the Halloween vibe, when the call is coming from within the house, it's definitely, a little bit more scarier. So those insider threats, you can't count out these risks from happening, and having a balanced approach in your investments in preventing them, detecting, response, and recovery is an absolute must. So investing in really strong access controls, building that security culture to empower your employees to be that immune system to identify bad actors, and then also having those insider threat playbooks and then being able to recover quickly from them is absolutely critical.
Thanks. And then lastly, Martin.
Thanks, Robyn. I think the threat that keeps us up at night operating national critical infrastructure is the state-sponsored cyber adversary. And we think about that and we worry about that every day. And as a result, we uplift our skill to be the best in the world. We try to give our employees the best opportunities for training and development that will allow us to defend against the most sophisticated adversaries.
On that scary note, thanks, everyone. And I think that's all we have time for today. We hope you all found this session engaging. Thank you for everyone who participated. We will send a link with the recording of this session to everyone who registered. So we'll send that later this week. So feel free to share that with your friends and colleagues. And the Summit team is always looking for expert speakers and panelists. And especially at this time of year, we've actually got our call for speakers open for the Summit, which will be taking place in Toronto next year, in person again in May. So if you feel you have some innovative or different thoughts about the futures of payments, please submit your call for speakers form on our website, thesummit.ca, and that closes on November 14th. And then our next installment of the Summit series will actually be a special in-person event in Montreal. So no more script reading for me there. I'm going to have to actually learn my lines. So I hope you'll join us there. And if you don't, we hope to see you at the Summit in person in May. And you can register for the Summit. The best pricing will be this side of the year. So you can go to thesummit.ca. And thanks again, everyone, for your time and your interest today. Thanks to my panelists. And I hope you have a good rest of your day, and happy Halloween to everyone.